Chapter 1. The year begins quietly. Gary Portman didn't make resolutions. He didn't believe in them. Resolutions were promises people made to themselves after too much champagne and too little foresight. He'd seen coworkers swear off carbs, vow to run marathons, pledge to finally learn Italian. By February, they were back to bagels and Netflix. So, on New Year's Eve, Gary sat alone in his one-bedroom apartment, wearing sweatpants and a t-shirt that had seen better days. Watching a romantic comedy he didn't believe in. The couple on screen was kissing in the snow. Music swelling like love was a magic trick anyone could learn. Gary snorted. "Sure," he muttered, stabbing at his microwave dinner with a plastic fork. "Because that's how life works." The fork snapped in half. Gary stared at the broken utensil like it had betrayed him personally. He sighed, got up, and rummaged through the drawer for another fork. Behind him, the microwave beeped again. Too late. The plastic tray had tipped, spilling gravy across the rotating plate. "Perfect," Gary said flatly. "Happy New Year to me." He cleaned up the mess, sat back down, and muted the TV. Outside, fireworks popped faintly in the distance. He imagined couples kissing under those bursts of color, strangers clinking glasses in crowded bars. Gary didn't feel lonely, not exactly. Loneliness implied wanting company. He just didn't expect it. His phone buzzed. A text from his mother. "Happy New Year, Gary. Call us soon. Love you." He stared at the screen for a moment, then typed back, "Happy New Year. Will do." That was enough. It always was. Gary's life was a straight line: work, home, sleep, repeat. He didn't hate it. He didn't love it. It was just life. He worked in clerical administration at a mid-sized firm downtown. 9 to 5, Monday through Friday. He filed reports, processed invoices, answered emails. Nothing glamorous, nothing terrible. He glanced at the clock. 11:58 p.m. 2 minutes until the new year. He thought about staying up to watch the ball drop on TV, then decided against it. What difference did it make? Midnight was just another minute. He was halfway to the bedroom when his email pinged. Gary frowned. Who sends emails at midnight? He opened his laptop and saw the subject line. "Start the year right. Join us for the company mixer." The body of the email was cheerful, almost aggressively so. "Kick off the new year with your coworkers. Drinks, snacks, and fun conversation. January 3rd, 6 p.m. at the Copper Lounge." Gary hovered over the delete button. He didn't do mixers. He didn't do fun conversation. But something, maybe boredom, maybe curiosity, made him pause. He closed the laptop without deleting the email. Outside, fireworks exploded louder now, painting the sky in red and gold. Gary stood by the window watching the colors fade. He wondered briefly what it might feel like to start the year with something different. Then he shook his head. "Not me," he said aloud. "That's for other people." But the email stayed in his inbox. Chapter 2. The mixer that wasn't supposed to matter. Gary Portman had 3 rules for surviving office life. 1. Never volunteer for anything. 2. Never get involved in office drama. 3. Never, under any circumstances, attend optional social events. The company mixer fell squarely under rule number 3. Yet here he was, standing outside the Copper Lounge on a chilly January evening, staring at the glowing sign like it was a warning label. He could still turn around. He could go home, heat up another microwave dinner, and watch reruns until bedtime. But something, maybe boredom, maybe the faint echo of fireworks from New Year's Eve, had pushed him out the door. He told himself it was networking. People said networking mattered. He didn't believe them, but it sounded like a reasonable excuse. Gary tugged at his jacket and stepped inside. The Copper Lounge was warm, dimly lit, and buzzing with chatter. A long bar stretched across one wall, and clusters of coworkers stood around high tables, laughing like they'd all been best friends since kindergarten. Gary felt his stomach tighten. He spotted a few familiar faces from the office. Mark from accounting, who wore a tie even at happy hour. Jenna from HR, already mid-story with a group that hung on her every word. Gary hovered near the entrance, debating whether to grab a drink or fake a phone call and leave. "Gary, you made it." He turned. It was Tom, his supervisor, cheerful, balding, and perpetually optimistic. Tom clapped him on the shoulder like they were old pals. "Didn't think you were the mixer type," Tom said, grinning. "I'm expanding my horizons," Gary replied, deadpan. Tom laughed like Gary had told the funniest joke of the night. "That's the spirit. Drinks are on the company tab until 7. Go mingle." Gary nodded, which was his polite way of saying I'd rather eat glass. He headed to the bar and ordered a soda. No alcohol. He didn't trust himself to drink around people he barely knew. As he waited, he heard laughter behind him, bright, unfiltered, the kind that made people turn their heads. "Seriously, who brings a spreadsheet to a mixer?" a voice said, amused. Gary glanced over his shoulder. A woman stood near the bar, holding a glass of wine and smiling at someone off camera. She had chestnut hair pulled into a loose bun, a navy blazer over a white blouse, and an expression that radiated confidence without trying. Gary looked away quickly. He wasn't here to notice people. He was here to What was his excuse again? Networking, right? The bartender slid his soda across the counter. Gary took a sip and scanned the room for the least intimidating group to join. Everyone looked intimidating. Hey, you're Gary, right? He turned again. It was her, the woman with the laugh. Up close, she seemed even more alive. Like the room tilted slightly toward her. Yeah, Gary said. That's me. I'm Emily, she said, offering a hand. Marketing. Gary shook her hand, hoping his palm wasn't clammy. Clerical, he said, then immediately regretted it. Who introduces themselves by job function? Emily smiled. Clerical. That sounds mysterious. It's not, Gary said. It's paperwork. She laughed. Not a polite chuckle, but a real laugh, like she found him genuinely funny. Gary blinked. People didn't usually laugh at what he said. So, Emily continued, what made you come tonight? You don't strike me as the mixer type. Gary hesitated. He could lie, say he loved socializing, or he could tell the truth. Honestly, I was bored, he said. Emily grinned. Best reason I've heard all night. Before Gary could think of a response, someone bumped his elbow. His soda tipped, splashing across the bar and onto Emily's sleeve. Oh! Gary grabbed a napkin, mortified. I'm so sorry. Emily looked at her sleeve, then at him and laughed again. Relax. Soda, not lava. Gary dabbed at the fabric anyway, feeling his ears burn. Still, I should've. Gary, Emily said, gently taking the napkin from him. It's fine. Really. She tossed the napkin aside and leaned against the bar. So, bored guy, do you ever do anything fun outside of work? Gary opened his mouth, then closed it. What counted as fun? Watching documentaries? Organizing his sock drawer? I read sometimes, he said finally. Emily tilted her head. Books or cereal boxes? Mostly books, Gary said, deadpan again. She laughed. Okay, that's better. What kind of books? Gary hesitated. Business stuff, productivity, that kind of thing. Emily raised an eyebrow. Wow, living on the edge. Gary almost smiled. Almost. They talked for a few more minutes, about the office coffee, terrible, the weather, also terrible, and the mystery of why mixers always serve tiny pretzels no one eats. Emily was quick, witty, and somehow made small talk feel less like dental surgery. Eventually, someone called her name from across the room. Emily gave Gary a quick smile. Well, Gary from Clerical, nice meeting you. Don't be a stranger. And just like that, she was gone, swallowed by a crowd of laughing coworkers. Gary stood there, holding his soda, feeling something. Not love. He didn't believe in love, but interest, curiosity, maybe. He finished his drink, said a quick goodbye to Tom, and stepped back into the cold night. On the walk home, he replayed the conversation in his head. Emily's laugh, her teasing questions, the way she said don't be a stranger. Gary didn't know what it meant, but for the first time in a long time, he wondered what might happen next. Chapter 3, Coffee and Complications. Gary Portman believed in patterns. Patterns were safe, predictable. His mornings followed the same rhythm. Wake up at 7, shower, dress, eat toast, catch the 8:15 bus, arrive at work by 9. No surprises, no deviations. So when he walked into Bean and Brew, the coffee shop near his office, and saw Emily, the Emily from the mixer, standing in line ahead of him, his brain short-circuited. She was scrolling through her phone, hair loose today, falling over her shoulders like she just stepped out of a shampoo commercial. Gary considered retreating. He could pretend he forgot his wallet, leave, and grab coffee at the office instead. But before he could execute his escape plan, Emily turned, spotted him, and smiled. Well, if it isn't Gary from Clerical, she said. Gary froze. Hi. Emily tucked her phone into her bag. What are you doing here? Getting coffee, Gary said, immediately regretting the obviousness of his answer. Emily grinned. Living dangerously, I see. Gary almost smiled. Almost. You? Same, she said, though I'm branching out, thinking of trying the caramel latte. Big risk. Gary nodded like she'd announced a major life decision. Sounds bold. Emily laughed, and Gary felt that same strange flicker he'd felt at the mixer. The sense that talking to her wasn't exhausting. It was easy. The line moved forward. Emily ordered her caramel latte. Gary ordered a plain black coffee because that's what he always ordered. They stepped aside to wait. Emily glanced at him. So, did you have fun at the mixer? Gary hesitated. Define fun. Emily laughed again. Fair enough. You didn't look miserable, which is something. I spilled soda on you, Gary said. And you apologized like 10 times, Emily replied. That's practically charming. Gary blinked. Charming. Don't let it go to your head, Emily said, smirking. Their drinks arrived. Emily picked up her latte, then tilted her head toward a corner table. Sit for a minute? Or do you have to rush back to your thrilling world of paperwork? Gary hesitated. He had time. He always had time. His lunch breaks were usually spent alone, scrolling through news articles he barely read. Sure, he said. They sat. Emily stirred her latte, watching the swirl of caramel. So, Gary, tell me something interesting about yourself. Gary stared at his coffee like it might provide an answer. I don't think I'm very interesting. Emily raised an eyebrow. Everyone's interesting. You just have to dig a little. Gary considered this. I once memorized all the state capitals. Emily blinked. Seriously? Yeah, Gary said. Felt like a good use of time. Emily laughed. That's oddly impressive. Why? Gary shrugged. I like facts. They don't change. People do. Emily studied him for a moment, her smile softening. That's kind of deep. Gary shifted in his seat, uncomfortable with the attention. Not really. Emily sipped her latte. You know, you're different from most people at the office. Gary frowned. Different how? You don't try so hard, Emily said. Everyone else is always performing. You're just you. Gary didn't know what to say to that. He wasn't trying to be anything. He just existed. Emily leaned back. Anyway, a bunch of us are doing trivia night at O'Malley's tomorrow. You should come. Gary blinked. Trivia night? Yeah, Emily said. You like facts, right? You'd crush it. Gary hesitated. Social events were not his thing. But Emily's eyes were bright, expectant. I'll think about it, he said. Emily smiled. That's a start. They finished their drinks and Emily stood. Well, Gary from Clerical. Don't be a stranger. Gary watched her leave, feeling that same unfamiliar pull. He didn't believe in love. But maybe, just maybe, he believed in curiosity. Chapter 4 Trivia Night Disaster. Gary Portman had spent most of Thursday convincing himself not to go to trivia night. He had a dozen reasons ready. He was tired, he had laundry, he didn't own a car, he didn't like crowds. But at 5:45 p.m., Gary found himself standing outside O'Malley's pub, clutching his jacket like it was a life raft. He wasn't sure how he'd gotten here. Maybe curiosity. Maybe Emily's smile when she said you'd crush it. Inside, the pub was loud and warm, filled with laughter and the smell of fried food. A chalkboard near the entrance read, Trivia Night, teams of 4 to 6, prizes, glory. Gary scanned the room. He spotted Emily at a corner table with 3 other coworkers, Jenna from HR, Mark from accounting, and a guy Gary vaguely recognized from IT. Emily waved him over like they were old friends. Gary, you came, she said, grinning. Gary nodded, trying not to look like he regretted every life choice that led him here. Yeah. Grab a seat, Emily said, patting the chair next to her. We're Team Brainstorm. Gary sat, feeling awkwardly tall and awkwardly. Everything. Jenna smiled. Welcome to the team, Gary. Emily says you're a facts guy. Gary blinked. She did. Emily smirked. Don't let us down. Before Gary could respond, the trivia host, a man in a neon green vest who looked far too enthusiastic, grabbed the mic. All right, folks. Round 1. Pop culture. Gary's stomach sank. Pop culture was his kryptonite. The first question boomed through the speakers. What singer released the hit single Watermelon Sugar in 2020? Jenna scribbled furiously. Harry Styles, she whispered. Gary stared at the paper like it was written in Greek. Emily leaned toward him. You okay? I thought watermelon sugar was a dessert, Gary said. Emily laughed so hard she nearly spilled her drink. Oh, Gary. The next question. Name the actress who played Wonder Woman in the 2017 film. Gary opened his mouth, then closed it. He had no idea. Gal Gadot, Mark said confidently. Gary nodded like he'd known that all along. By the end of round 1, Team Brainstorm had scored a 5 out of 10. Jenna looked mildly disappointed. Emily looked amused. Don't worry, she said, nudging Gary. History's next. Your time to shine. Gary perked up. History he could do. The host announced the first question. What year did the Berlin Wall fall? Gary didn't hesitate. 1989. Emily grinned. See? I knew you'd be useful. The next question. Who was the first U.S. president to appear on television? Gary frowned. Roosevelt. Franklin D. Correct, the host shouted. Gary felt a flicker of pride. Maybe this wasn't a total disaster. Then came the final question of the round. What ancient civilization built Machu Picchu? Gary answered instantly. The Inca. Emily high-fived him, her hand warm against his. Gary froze for half a second, then smiled, an actual smile. By the end of round 2, Team Brainstorm had climbed to second place. Emily looked at Gary like he'd just saved the world. You're officially our MVP, she said. Gary shrugged, trying to play it cool. Just like facts. Emily laughed. You're full of surprises. The next round was random knowledge, which turned out to be a minefield of bizarre questions. The weight of a bowling ball, the inventor of Velcro, the number of bones in a shark. Gary knew some, guessed others, and somehow kept the team afloat. When the final scores were announced, Team Brainstorm landed in third place. Not bad for a group that started with Harry Styles' confusion. Emily raised her glass. To Gary, the trivia king. Gary felt his ears burn. I'm not. Don't argue, Emily said, smiling. You made tonight fun. Gary didn't know what to say. He wasn't used to being appreciated. As the group dispersed, Emily lingered. "Hey," she said softly. "Thanks for coming. I know this probably wasn't your usual Thursday night." Gary nodded. "It wasn't bad." Emily grinned. "High praise." They walked out together into the crisp night air. Emily pulled her coat tighter. "So, Gary from Clerical, maybe next time you'll pick the event." Gary blinked. "Next time." Emily smiled. "Don't overthink it. Just, don't be a stranger." She waved, heading toward the subway. Gary watched her go, feeling something he couldn't quite name. Maybe trivia wasn't the disaster he expected. Maybe, just maybe, it was the start of something. Chapter 5, the text that changes everything. Gary Portman wasn't a man who stared at his phone. He wasn't a man who waited for notifications like they were lottery numbers. But Friday morning, as he sat at his desk sorting invoices, his phone buzzed, and for the first time in years, his pulse jumped. He glanced down. Emily. The message was simple. "Hey, Trivia King. Thanks for last night. Still impressed by the Machu Picchu thing. Lunch next week? My treat." Smiley face. Gary read it twice. Then a third time. His brain scrambled for a response. Lunch? With Emily? Voluntarily? He wasn't sure if this was casual or something else. He wasn't even sure what something else looked like. He opened the reply box. Typed, "Sure. Sounds good." Then deleted it. Too bland. He typed, "Lunch would be great. Thanks for inviting me." Deleted that too. Too formal. He stared at the blinking cursor like it was mocking him. Why was this so hard? It was just lunch. People ate lunch every day. But Gary wasn't people. Gary was Gary. Finally, he typed, "Lunch sounds good. Let me know when." He hovered over send for a full 30 seconds before tapping it. The message whooshed away. Gary exhaled like he'd just defused a bomb. The rest of the day crawled. Gary checked his phone more times than he'd admit. At 3:17 p.m., Emily replied, "How about Tuesday? Noon? There's a place near the office, the garden table. Best sandwiches in town." Gary typed back, "Tuesday works. See you then." Short, safe, neutral. He put the phone down and stared at his computer screen. But the invoices blurred. All he could think about was Tuesday, and sandwiches, and Emily's smile. That night, Gary sat on his couch, remote in hand, TV flickering in the background. He wasn't watching. He was thinking about Emily, about trivia night, about the way she'd said don't be a stranger. He didn't know what this was. Friendship? Something more? He wasn't sure he wanted to know. Wanting things was dangerous. Wanting led to disappointment. But still, he wanted Tuesday to come faster. Tuesday arrived like a slow sunrise. Gary dressed carefully, not too formal, not too casual. He swapped his usual gray shirt for a navy one, hoping it looked less like he'd given up on life. At 11:55, he walked to the garden table. It was a cozy cafe with hanging plants and chalkboard menus. Emily was already there, waving from a corner booth. "Gary," she said, smiling like she meant it. "You made it." Gary slid into the seat across from her. "Yeah." Emily grinned. "You look different today." Gary blinked. "Different how?" "Less clerical," Emily teased. Gary almost laughed. "Almost. Thanks, I think." They ordered. Emily got a turkey avocado sandwich. Gary chose roast beef because it sounded safe. As they waited, Emily leaned forward. "So, Trivia King, what's your secret? How do you know all that stuff?" Gary shrugged. "I read. A lot." "About history?" Emily asked. "History. Geography. Random facts," Gary said. "They don't change. People do." Emily tilted her head. "You said that before. About facts." Gary nodded. "It's comforting." Emily studied him for a moment, her expression softening. "You know, most people don't think like that." Gary shifted in his seat. "Most people had different lives than me." Emily didn't push. She just smiled. "Well, I think it's kind of cool." The sandwiches arrived. Emily took a bite, then pointed her fork at him. "So, Gary, what do you actually want? Like, in life?" Gary froze. "Want? Yeah," Emily said. "Dreams. Goals. Big picture stuff." Gary stared at his plate. He'd never been asked that before, not seriously. He thought about his apartment, his job, his quiet routines. He thought about how he'd built a life without expecting anything from anyone. "I don't know," he said finally. "I guess I never thought about it." Emily smiled gently. "Maybe you should." Gary didn't answer. He just chewed his sandwich, feeling something shift inside him. Something small, but undeniable. They talked about lighter things after that, movies, music, the absurdity of office politics. Emily was funny, quick, and somehow made Gary feel like he wasn't invisible. When lunch ended, Emily stood, pulling on her coat. "Thanks for coming, Gary. This was fun." Gary nodded. "Yeah, it was." Emily smiled. "Next time, you pick the place." Next time. The words echoed in Gary's head as he walked back to the office. For the first time in years, Gary felt like maybe, just maybe, life wasn't a straight line anymore. Chapter 6, Lunch and Layers. Gary Portman had never thought much about sandwiches before Tuesday. They were food, functional, forgettable. But now, every time he passed the garden table, he thought about Emily's smile across that booth, the way she'd asked him what he wanted in life like it was a question with an answer. He didn't have an answer. Not yet. But the question lingered like an echo. 2 days later, Gary found himself standing outside the same cafe. This time because Emily had texted. Round 2? Friday. Same place. My treat again. Unless you insist on paying. Smiley face. Gary had stared at the message for a full minute before replying. Friday works. I'll pay this time. Now here he was, pushing open the door, heart doing something weird, like jogging in place. Emily was already there, waving him over with that easy confidence that made Gary feel both awkward and something else. Something he didn't have a word for. Gary, she said, smiling. Look at you, punctual as ever. Gary slid into the booth. Habit. Emily grinned. You and your patterns. They ordered. Emily went for a grilled veggie wrap this time. Gary stuck with roast beef because he wasn't ready for culinary risks. As they waited, Emily leaned forward, chin resting on her hand. So, did you think about what I asked last time? Gary blinked. What you asked? Emily's eyes softened. What you want? Big picture. Gary stared at the table. He had thought about it on the bus, in the shower, lying awake at night. But every time his mind hit a wall. I don't know, he said finally. I guess I've always just done what I had to do. Emily nodded slowly. Survival mode. Gary frowned. Is that bad? Emily shrugged. Not bad. Just safe. But safe isn't the same as happy. Gary didn't answer. He wasn't sure he believed in happy. Not the way people talked about it, like fireworks and fairy tales. Emily smiled gently. You know, when I was a kid, I wanted to be a travel writer. Go everywhere. Write about everything. Gary blinked. And now you're in marketing. Emily laughed. Yeah. Life happens. Bills happen. But I still try to chase little pieces of that dream. Weekend trips, journaling, stuff like that. Gary considered this. So, you didn't give up. Emily tilted her head. Not completely. I think that's the trick. Don't give up completely. Gary looked down at his hands. He wasn't sure he'd ever had anything to give up. The sandwiches arrived, breaking the moment. Emily took a bite, then pointed her fork at him. Okay, new question. If you could go anywhere at all, where would you go? Gary hesitated. I've never really traveled. Pretend you could, Emily said. No limits. Gary thought for a moment. Maybe Scotland. I read about the Highlands once. Seemed quiet. Emily smiled. Quiet can be beautiful. Gary nodded. Yeah. They ate in comfortable silence for a while. Then Emily spoke again, softer this time. You know, Gary, you're different. Gary blinked. Different how? Emily smiled. Most people talk just to fill space. You talk when it matters. Gary didn't know what to do with that. Compliments were foreign currency to him, valuable but hard to spend. He cleared his throat. You talk a lot. Emily laughed. Fair. But I like talking to you. Gary felt something shift inside him, small, but undeniable. When lunch ended, Gary reached for the check, but Emily waved him off. Next time, she said. You can pay next time. Next time. The words echoed again, like they had at trivia night. As they walked out, Emily glanced at him. Hey, there's an art exhibit this weekend. Modern stuff, lots of color. You should come. Gary blinked. Me? Yeah, Emily said, smiling. It'll be fun. And don't say you're busy. I know you're not. Gary almost laughed. Almost. I'll think about it. Emily grinned. That's progress. She waved, heading down the street. Gary watched her go, feeling something he hadn't felt in years. Anticipation. That night, Gary sat on his couch, staring at the ceiling. He didn't believe in love. He didn't believe in fairy tales. But maybe, just maybe, he believed in possibility. And that was new. Chapter 7, The Unexpected Favor. Gary Portman had never been anyone's first choice for help. He wasn't the guy people called when they needed a favor. He wasn't the guy people called for anything, really. So when his phone buzzed on Monday morning with a message from Emily, he stared at it like it was written in code. Hey, Gary. Quick question. Can you help me with something? Work-related. Promise it's not boring. Smiley face. Gary read it twice. Then a third time. Help? Him? He wasn't sure if this was a trap or a miracle. He typed back, sure. What do you need? The reply came fast. I'm putting together a presentation for the quarterly meeting. Need someone to sanity check the numbers. You're good with details, right? Gary blinked. Good with details? That was accurate. Painfully accurate. I can do that, he typed. Awesome. Meet me in the conference room at 3. I'll bring coffee. Gary stared at the screen, feeling something strange. Anticipation mixed with mild terror. He wasn't used to being needed. He wasn't sure he liked it, but he was already in too deep to back out. At 3 o'clock sharp, Gary walked into the conference room. Emily was there. Laptop open, papers spread across the table like a colorful explosion. She looked up and smiled. Gary, my hero. Gary froze. I'm not a hero. Emily grinned. Today you are. Sit. He sat, trying not to look like he was bracing for impact. Emily slid a stack of charts toward him. Okay, so these are the numbers for the campaign. I need to make sure they're not, insane. Gary scanned the pages. Click-through rates, conversion percentages, ROI projections. He frowned. This one's wrong. Emily leaned over his shoulder, close enough that Gary could smell her shampoo. Something citrusy and bright. Which one? Gary pointed. You've got 12% here, but the actual is 8.7%. If you present this, someone will notice. Emily groaned. Ugh, I knew it. You're a lifesaver. Gary shrugged. Just paying attention. Emily smiled. You'd be surprised how rare that is. They worked through the numbers together, Emily cracking jokes every few minutes, Gary quietly correcting errors like a human spell check. At one point, Emily spilled coffee on a chart and laughed so hard she nearly fell off her chair. Seriously, she said, wiping the table. How do you stay so calm? If this were me, I'd be panicking. Gary shrugged. Panicking doesn't fix math. Emily laughed again. You're like Zen. Spreadsheet Zen. Gary didn't know what to say to that. Compliments still felt like foreign currency. By the time they finished, the presentation looked solid. Emily leaned back, stretching her arms. Gary, you just saved me from public humiliation. I owe you. Gary shook his head. You don't owe me. Emily grinned. Too late. I'm buying you dinner. Gary blinked. Dinner? Yeah, Emily said, like it was obvious. Tonight. My treat. And don't argue. I already decided. Gary opened his mouth to argue anyway, then closed it. He wasn't sure if this was friendship or something else, but he wasn't about to say no. Okay, he said quietly. Emily smiled. Good. 7 o'clock. There's a little Italian place near my apartment. You'll love it. Gary nodded, feeling his pulse do that weird jog again. Dinner. With Emily. Voluntarily. That night, Gary stood outside La Bella Vita, a cozy Italian restaurant with twinkling lights in the window. He'd changed shirts twice before settling on the least wrinkled option. Emily was already inside, waving from a corner table. She looked different. Not in a dramatic way, just softer somehow. Her hair was down, her blazer swapped for a simple sweater. Gary, she said, smiling. You made it. Gary slid into the seat across from her. Yeah. Emily grinned. You look nice. Gary blinked. Thanks. He wasn't sure if he did, but he appreciated the lie. They ordered. Emily got pasta primavera. Gary chose spaghetti because it seemed safe. As they waited, Emily leaned forward. So, spreadsheet Zen master, do you ever do anything fun? Outside of work and trivia. Gary hesitated. Define fun. Emily laughed. Anything that makes you smile. Gary thought about it. I read. Walk sometimes. Emily tilted her head. Walk where? Just around, Gary said. Quiet streets. Emily smiled. You really like quiet, don't you? Gary nodded. It's predictable. Emily studied him for a moment, then said softly, you know, not everything unpredictable is bad. Gary didn't answer. He wasn't sure he believed that. But sitting here across from Emily, he wondered if maybe, just maybe, she was right. Dinner was easy, like trivia night but warmer. Emily told stories about college, about her first disastrous job interview, about the time she accidentally sent a meme to the CEO. Gary listened, occasionally adding dry comments that made her laugh harder than he expected. When the check came, Emily snatched it before Gary could move. I told you, my treat. Gary shook his head. You don't have to. Emily grinned. Gary, let me do this. You saved me today. Gary gave up. Okay. They walked out into the cool night air. Emily pulled her coat tighter. Thanks for coming. This was nice. Gary nodded. Yeah, it was. Emily smiled. Next time, you pick the place. Next time. The words echoed again like they had before. As Gary walked home, he realized something. He didn't feel like a background character tonight. He felt seen. And that was new. Chapter 8. A hint of jealousy. Gary Portman didn't believe in jealousy. Jealousy was for people who cared too much, who expected things from others. Gary didn't expect anything. That was his rule. But rules have a way of bending when you're not paying attention. It started on Wednesday. Gary was walking back from lunch when he passed the break room and heard laughter. Bright, familiar laughter. Emily's laughter. He slowed, pretending to check his phone, and glanced inside. Emily was leaning against the counter, talking to Ryan from IT, the same guy from trivia night. Ryan was tall, broad-shouldered, and currently grinning like he just won the lottery. Emily laughed again, tossing her hair back. Ryan said something Gary couldn't hear, and Emily touched his arm lightly, like it was the most natural thing in the world. Gary felt something sharp twist in his chest. It wasn't pain exactly, more like static. He looked away, forcing his feet to move. It didn't matter. Emily could talk to whoever she wanted. Gary wasn't her boyfriend. He wasn't even her best friend. He was Gary. Still, the image stuck in his head all afternoon. Emily laughing, Ryan leaning in, that casual touch. By 5 o'clock, Gary had convinced himself he was being ridiculous. People talk. People laugh. It didn't mean anything, except Why did it feel like it did? The next day, Gary saw Emily in the hallway. She smiled like always. Hey Gary, how's your day? Gary nodded. Fine. His voice sounded flat, even to him. Emily tilted her head. You okay? Yeah, Gary said quickly. Just busy. Emily smiled. Well, don't work too hard. We need you for trivia next week. Gary managed a weak smile. Right? She walked away and Gary felt that static again. Louder this time. That night, Gary sat on his couch, staring at the ceiling. He didn't like this feeling. It was messy, unpredictable. He'd built his life to avoid feelings like this. But here it was, buzzing under his skin like a faulty wire. He thought about Emily's laugh, her smile, the way she said don't be a stranger. He thought about Ryan's grin, that easy confidence Gary would never have. Gary didn't believe in love. But maybe he believed in wanting, and wanting was dangerous. Friday came, and Gary found himself in the elevator with Emily. She was holding a folder, humming softly to herself. Big plans this weekend? She asked, smiling. Gary hesitated. Not really. Emily grinned. You should come to the art exhibit tomorrow. Remember? I told you about it. Gary blinked. You're still going? Of course, Emily said. Ryan's coming too. He's into photography. Gary felt the static spike. Ryan. Emily nodded. Yeah, he's fun. Gary swallowed hard. Right? Emily tilted her head. You should come too. The more the merrier. Gary opened his mouth, then closed it. He wanted to say yes. He wanted to be there. But the thought of standing next to Ryan, watching Emily laugh at his jokes, made Gary's stomach knot. I have stuff to do, he said finally. Emily smiled, a little disappointed. Okay, next time. The elevator doors opened, and Gary stepped out, feeling like he'd just lost something he never really had. That night, Gary sat in his apartment, staring at his phone. He could text her. He could say he changed his mind. He could go to the exhibit, stand awkwardly among paintings, and pretend he wasn't silently competing with Ryan. But he didn't. Instead, he put the phone down and turned off the light. For the first time in years, Gary hated the quiet. Chapter 9, the almost date. Gary Portman wasn't sure why he said yes. Maybe it was guilt. Maybe it was the memory of Emily's disappointed smile in the elevator. Or maybe it was the fact that he'd spent Saturday night staring at his ceiling, wondering what Ryan was saying to her at the art exhibit. Whatever the reason, when Emily texted Sunday morning, hey, rain check on the exhibit. There's a new gallery opening next weekend. Want to come? Gary typed back before he could overthink it. Sure. And just like that, he had plans. Real plans. With Emily. Saturday arrived too fast. Gary stood in front of his closet, staring at shirts like they were riddles. What did one wear to an art gallery? He Googled it, then immediately regretted it. Every result featured people who looked like they belonged in magazines. Gary settled on a navy button-down and jeans, hoping he looked casual but not tragic. He arrived at the gallery 10 minutes early, because being late was chaos and Gary didn't do chaos. The building was sleek and modern, all glass and steel, with abstract sculptures scattered across the lawn like alien artifacts. Inside, the air smelled faintly of paint and expensive perfume. People milled around, sipping wine and nodding at canvases like they understood something profound. Gary felt like he'd wandered into a foreign country without a map. Then he saw her. Emily stood near a massive painting of swirling colors, wearing a simple green dress that somehow made the whole room look dull by comparison. She spotted him and smiled, bright, warm, like he was the only person who mattered. Gary, she said, waving him over. You made it. Gary nodded, trying not to look like he'd rehearsed this moment in his head all week. Yeah. Emily grinned. You look nice. Gary blinked. Thanks. He wasn't sure if he did, but he appreciated the lie. They wandered through the gallery together, Emily chatting easily about the art, Gary mostly listening. He didn't understand half of what she said. Composition, negative space, emotional resonance. But he liked the way her voice softened when she talked about color, the way her eyes lit up when she found something beautiful. At one point, Emily stopped in front of a painting that looked like someone had thrown a rainbow into a blender. What do you think? She asked. Gary stared at it. Looks messy. Emily laughed. That's the point. Chaos can be beautiful. Gary frowned. I'm not sure I believe that. Emily smiled. That's because you like patterns. Gary almost smiled back. Maybe. They ended up at the gallery cafe afterward, sitting at a small table by the window. Emily ordered tea. Gary got coffee because it was safe. So, Emily said, stirring her tea. Did you hate it? Gary shook his head. No. It was interesting. Emily grinned. High praise from you. Gary hesitated, then said quietly, I liked being there. With you. Emily's smile softened. Me too. For a moment, the world felt still. Just them, sunlight spilling through the glass, the hum of quiet conversation around them. Gary felt something shift inside him, something he couldn't name but didn't want to lose. Then Emily's phone buzzed. She glanced at the screen and sighed. Work. They need me to review something. Gary nodded, trying not to feel disappointed. Right? Emily stood, pulling on her coat. Thanks for coming, Gary. This was really nice. Gary nodded again. Yeah. Emily smiled. Next time, dinner. No art, no spreadsheets. Just food. Next time. The words echoed like they always did. Gary watched her leave, feeling that strange mix of hope and fear. He didn't believe in love. But maybe, just maybe, he believed in wanting. And wanting was dangerous. That night, Gary lay in bed, staring at the ceiling. He thought about Emily's laugh, her smile, the way she said next time like it was a promise. He didn't know where this was going. He wasn't sure he wanted to know. But for the first time in years, he wanted something enough to risk the quiet. Chapter 10, The Confession That Wasn't Planned. Gary Portman didn't plan to say anything. He wasn't the kind of man who made grand declarations. He wasn't even the kind of man who made small ones. His life was built on quiet. Quiet choices, quiet routines, quiet exits. But sometimes words slip out when you least expect them. It happened on a Thursday evening. Emily had asked him to meet at a little diner near the office. Nothing fancy, just burgers and milkshakes and neon signs that buzzed faintly overhead. Gary liked the place immediately. Felt simple, predictable, safe. Emily was already in a booth when he arrived, waving him over with that smile that made Gary feel like maybe the world wasn't as cold as he'd always believed. Gary, she said, you made it. Gary slid into the seat across from her. Yeah. Emily grinned. You're getting better at this whole socializing thing. Gary almost smiled. Almost. Practice. They ordered. Emily got a cheeseburger. Gary went for the same because it seemed easier than thinking. As they waited, Emily leaned forward, chin resting on her hand. So, she said, how's life in clerical land? Gary shrugged. Same as always. Emily tilted her head. You ever think about doing something else? Gary hesitated. Sometimes. Emily smiled. Like what? Gary stared at the table. He didn't have an answer. Or maybe he did, but it wasn't about work. It was about sitting here, across from her, wanting something he didn't know how to name. I don't know, he said finally. Something different. Emily's eyes softened. Different can be good. Gary nodded, but his chest felt tight. He wanted to tell her, wanted to say something real, something that mattered. But the words stayed locked behind his teeth. The food arrived, breaking the moment. Emily took a bite of her burger and groaned happily. This is so good. You have to try the milkshake. Gary sipped his chocolate shake, trying to focus on the sweetness instead of the storm in his head. He wasn't supposed to feel this way. He wasn't supposed to want things. Wanting led to disappointment. He'd learned that a long time ago. But Emily laughed at something. A soft, unguarded laugh, and the words slipped out before he could stop them. I like being with you. Emily froze, burger halfway to her mouth. What? Gary felt his face heat. I mean, I like spending time with you. Emily set her burger down slowly. Gary. Gary stared at his hands. I'm not good at this, talking. But I wanted you to know. There was a long pause. Gary braced himself for the polite smile, the gentle letdown, the you're a great friend speech. Instead, Emily reached across the table and touched his hand. Light, warm, steady. I like being with you too, she said softly. Gary looked up, startled. Emily was smiling. Not teasing, not amused, but something else. Something real. For a moment, the diner faded. The neon lights, the hum of conversation, the clatter of dishes. It was just them. Hands touching across a formica table. Words hanging in the air like fragile glass. Gary swallowed hard. I didn't expect that. Emily laughed gently. Neither did I. They didn't talk about it much after that. They finished their burgers, shared a slice of pie, and walked out into the cool night air. Emily pulled her coat tighter, glancing at him with a smile that felt different now, warmer, heavier, like it carried something unspoken. Thanks for tonight, she said. Gary nodded. Yeah. Emily hesitated, then said softly, next time. Maybe we don't call it just dinner. Gary blinked. Next time. Emily smiled. Yeah, next time. She waved, heading down the street. Gary watched her go, heart pounding like it had forgotten how to be quiet. That night, Gary lay in bed, staring at the ceiling. He didn't know what this was. He didn't know where it was going. But for the first time in years, he felt something bigger than routine, bigger than quiet. He felt hope, and that was terrifying. And wonderful. Chapter 11, Fireworks and Forward Motion. Gary Portman had never looked forward to New Year's Eve. It was a holiday for other people. People with champagne flutes and countdowns and someone to kiss at midnight. For Gary, it was usually a night of muted TV and microwave dinners. But this year was different. Emily had texted him 2 days ago. Big plans for New Year's? Or should we make some? Fireworks at Riverside Park. Midnight. You in? Gary had stared at the message for a long time, heart thudding like it was trying to escape his chest. Fireworks. Midnight. With Emily. He typed back, I'm in. And now, here he was, standing at the edge of Riverside Park, bundled in his best coat, hands shoved deep in his pockets to keep from fidgeting. The air was crisp, the sky clear, and the city hummed with anticipation. Emily arrived 5 minutes later, her cheeks pink from the cold, her smile bright enough to outshine the streetlights. "Gary," she said, waving. "You made it." Gary nodded, trying not to look like he'd been rehearsing this moment in his head for 48 hours. "Yeah." Emily grinned. "Look at you, braving the crowds." Gary glanced around. The park was packed. Families, couples, groups of friends, all buzzing with excitement. Normally, this would have been Gary's personal nightmare. But tonight, it felt different. "Not so bad," he said quietly. Emily laughed. "Progress." They found a spot near the river, the city skyline glittering in the distance. Emily handed him a paper cup of hot chocolate. "To keep you warm," she said. Gary took it, feeling the heat seep into his fingers. "Thanks." Emily sipped her own drink, then glanced at him. "So, Gary from Clerical, how does it feel to end the year with something unpredictable?" Gary hesitated, then said softly, "Better than I thought." Emily smiled. "Good answer." The countdown began somewhere in the crowd. 10, 9, 8, and Gary felt his pulse quicken. He wasn't sure why. It was just a number on a clock. But tonight it felt like more. 7, 6, 5. Emily turned to him, her eyes bright, her breath visible in the cold air. "Gary." Gary swallowed hard. "Yeah." For 3. Emily smiled, soft, warm, the kind of smile that made the world tilt. "Happy almost New Year." 2, 1. Fireworks exploded overhead, painting the sky in bursts of red and gold. The crowd cheered, voices rising like a wave. Gary barely heard them. All he saw was Emily, standing close enough that he could feel the heat of her body through her coat. And before he could overthink it, before he could talk himself out of it, Gary leaned in and kissed her. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't cinematic. It was soft, tentative, like a question. But Emily answered without hesitation, kissing him back with a warmth that made Gary forget the cold, the crowd, the years of quiet he'd carried like armor. When they pulled apart, Emily was smiling, her cheeks flushed, her eyes shining like the fireworks above them. "Gary," she whispered. "That was unexpected." Gary managed a shaky smile. "Chaos can be beautiful." Emily laughed, a bright, unguarded laugh, and Gary realized something. He wasn't afraid anymore, not of wanting, not of hoping, not of being seen. For the first time in his life, Gary Portman believed in something bigger than patterns, bigger than quiet. He believed in possibility. And tonight, possibility tasted like fireworks and hot chocolate and Emily's lips against his. Chapter 12. The morning after. Gary Portman woke up on New Year's Day with a strange feeling in his chest, light, buoyant, like someone had swapped out the usual weight for helium. For a moment, he lay still, staring at the ceiling, wondering if it had all been a dream. The fireworks, the kiss, Emily's laugh against the night sky. No, it was real. He could still feel the ghost of her lips on his, soft and warm, like a secret he wasn't ready to share with the world. Gary sat up slowly, rubbing his face. His apartment was quiet as always, but it didn't feel the same kind of quiet. It felt temporary, like silence waiting to be broken. His phone buzzed on the nightstand. Gary's heart jumped. He grabbed it, half expecting reality to crash down in the form of a polite text. "Last night was nice," but instead, the message read, "Morning, fireworks guy. Hope you didn't freeze to death walking home. Coffee later? My treat." Smiley face. Gary stared at the screen, then laughed. A short, startled sound that felt foreign in his own apartment. Coffee. Later. Like last night wasn't a mistake. Like it was the start of something. He typed back before he could overthink it. "I survived. Coffee sounds good." When? The reply came fast. "Noon. Bean and brew. Don't be late." Gary set the phone down, his pulse still racing. Noon. That gave him 3 hours to figure out how to look like a man who hadn't spent the last decade hiding behind routine. Bean and brew was buzzing when Gary walked in, the smell of espresso thick in the air. Emily was already there, waving from a corner table, her smile bright enough to make Gary forget the cold outside. "Gary," she said, "look at you, punctual as ever." Gary slid into the seat across from her. "Habit." Emily grinned. "You and your patterns." They ordered. Emily got a caramel latte. Gary stuck with black coffee because some habits were harder to break. As they waited, Emily leaned forward, chin resting on her hand. "So," she said, eyes sparkling, "how does it feel to start the year with fireworks?" Gary hesitated, then said softly, "Better than I thought." Emily smiled. "Good answer." They talked about the night before, about the kiss, about how Gary had looked like he was about to faint when the countdown hit 0. Emily teased him gently, and Gary found himself laughing more than he had in years. At one point, Emily reached across the table and touched his hand, just like she had at the diner. "You know," she said, her voice softer now, "I wasn't expecting last night." Gary swallowed hard. "Me neither." Emily smiled. "But I'm glad it happened." Gary nodded, feeling something settle inside him. Something steady, like a foundation being laid. "Me too." They lingered over coffee, talking about everything and nothing. Emily told him about her plans for the year, travel, maybe a photography class. Gary listened, wondering if he could learn to want things like that too. When they finally stood to leave, Emily slipped her arm through his like it was the most natural thing in the world. "Come on, fireworks guy," she said, grinning. "Let's make this year less boring." Gary almost laughed. "Almost. I'll try." Emily squeezed his arm. "That's all I ask." As they walked out into the crisp January air, Gary realized something. The quiet he'd carried for so long wasn't gone, but it wasn't the same. It wasn't heavy anymore. It was just space. Space for something new. And for the first time in his life, Gary wanted to fill it. Chapter 13, A New Pattern. Gary Portman had always believed life was a straight line, a quiet, predictable path from one day to the next. But as January unfolded, he realized something. Lines can bend. Sometimes they curve towards something unexpected. Sometimes they lead to someone. It started small. Coffee dates that turned into long walks. Texts that turned into calls. Emily's laughter filling spaces Gary never realized were empty. He still worked his 9-to-5 job. He still filed reports and processed invoices. But now, his days had color, bright, messy strokes like the paintings Emily loved. One evening, Gary found himself standing in his apartment, staring at his calendar. It used to be blank except for work deadlines. Now it had notes in Emily's handwriting. Trivia night, dinner at Bella Vita, gallery opening. Gary smiled. A real smile, the kind that felt strange and wonderful on his face. On a quiet Sunday afternoon, Emily came over for the first time. Gary had cleaned obsessively, scrubbing counters and aligning books like soldiers. When she walked in, she laughed softly. "Gary," she said, looking around. "This place is very you." Gary frowned. "Is that good?" Emily grinned. "It's neat, predictable, but maybe we can add a little chaos." Gary almost laughed. "Almost. Chaos can be beautiful," he said quietly. Emily's smile softened. "You remembered." They spent the afternoon cooking. Well, Emily cooked and Gary tried not to burn anything. At one point, Emily handed him a knife and said, "Chop the peppers." Gary stared at the peppers like they were a math problem. "How?" Emily laughed so hard she had to lean against the counter. "Gary, you're hopeless." But she guided his hands, patient and warm, and Gary realized something. He didn't mind being hopeless if it meant learning with her. Later, they sat on the couch, plates balanced on their knees, watching a movie Gary would have dismissed as unrealistic a month ago. A romantic comedy with happy endings and grand gestures. Emily glanced at him halfway through. "Still think love is like aliens?" Gary hesitated, then said softly, "Maybe not." Emily smiled. "Progress." Gary looked at her. The way her hair fell across her shoulder, the way her eyes crinkled when she smiled, and felt something settle inside him. Not chaos, not fear, something steady. Hope. Weeks passed. Winter softened into early hints of spring. Gary found himself doing things he never imagined. Visiting art exhibits, trying new foods, even laughing out loud in crowded rooms. He still liked patterns. He still liked quiet. But now, his patterns had space for color. His quiet had room for laughter. And one evening, as he walked Emily home under a sky streaked with pink and gold, Gary realized something. He didn't feel like a background character anymore. He felt like someone living a story. At her door, Emily turned to him, smiling that smile that had changed everything. "So, Gary from Clerical?" she teased. "What's next?" Gary thought about it, the straight lines, the curves, the fireworks, the laughter. He thought about how he'd spent years expecting nothing, and how Emily had taught him that wanting wasn't weakness. It was life. He smiled, a real, unguarded smile. "Next," he said softly, "is dinner. Tomorrow. My treat." Emily laughed, bright and warm, and kissed him like it was the most natural thing in the world. And for the first time in his life, Gary Portman believed in happy endings. Not the kind from movies, but the kind you build one quiet, beautiful moment at a time.